Sometimes I really do feel like I'm on a merry-go-round of pain. Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, today's video is sponsored by Fume. I want to make note of this too, this is so unrelated to anything in this video or anything on my channel, but you guys have been consistently commenting on how much you like my nails, so I'm going to show you the new set. I think these are quite cute. And my nail artist just found out recently that I have a channel, so if you're watching, good job you. These are my favorites. So, as many of you already know, I have twice now talked about the upcoming HBO Harry Potter series expected in late 2026, 2027. Which feels like a lot of time to dedicate to a franchise that I don't think is nearly as good as Lord of the Rings. You shall not pass! But what would I know? I'm just a girl who used to wear a Middle-earth map dress out clubbing, unironically. I'm sure editing Sydney is going to grace us with that image if she can actually find it. Yes, I did find it, and that is correct. I also found this other picture in the archive where you are wearing a swimsuit that is entirely Aragorn's face with Sam and Frodo at the bottom. Seek help. Anyway, to date, along with lots of other people online, my commentary on this issue has centered around the casting decision that will see Black British actor Papa Asiadu playing Severus Snape, a choice that has been genuinely absurd for a show that is positioning itself as a faithful adaptation of the books. With Asiadu, when they say faithful, they mean that the actor is close in age to Book Snape. I'm not joking. Don't worry yourselves about that awkward skin color thing. But since this information has come to light, this show, which isn't even in production yet, has come under immense amounts of scrutiny, with lots of people, me included, assuming that someone in the core trio, that being Ron, Harry, Hermione, would be race swapped as well. I actually saw this picture floating around and briefly gloated to my friends that my assessment had been correct. I just spammed them with, "Look, I told you so." But that turned out to not be the case. But then HBO actually announced who would be playing Ron, Harry, and Hermione a few days later on May 27th, so I prematurely gloated. Sort of. Now, Harry and Ron more or less look how we probably all expected, but the controversy online has come from Hermione's casting. Listen, although I was wrong about the fact that she was actually going to be race swapped, I was correct from the perspective that if they were gonna mess with anybody, it was going to be Hermione. So you know what? I'm gonna take the win, and there's nothing any of you can do about it.
You take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all.
The new series Hermione is set to be played by 11-year-old Arabella Stanton, who also played Matilda in the West End's Matilda the musical. What's been interesting about all of this is how Stanton's casting has separated people into two primary camps. Those who believe she looks exactly like Book Hermione is described and captures the spirit of the character, her sass and signature know-it-all vibe. People have been using this casting clip of Stanton to illustrate this point.
How did you know that?
You've circled the block a few times, so you're obviously lost. If I'm investigating a missing person, I started the post office to see if they registered an emailing address. Except our post office collapsed about a month ago, and they haven't updated the online coordinates. I could show you if you ask nicely.
Maybe it's just me, but don't a lot of English people always sound like know-it-alls?
Got a cauliflower for if a vegetarian comes.
Unless you have a Scouse accent, then not so much. I loved it when I visited Liverpool. Really, I felt like I needed some earplugs. I'm so acutely aware of the fact that someone with my accent does not have the right to be poking fun at anyone else's, so do with that information what you will. Anyway, the other camp believe that Stanton's tan skin signal another race swap in a series that has already demonstrated it is prepared to change the races of primary characters. Not good. This group has also been sharing a specific concept drawing by J.K. Rowling that shows a seemingly white, buck-toothed, frizzy-haired Hermione. The back and forth between these two camps has once again brought up the argument made over the years that J.K. Rowling never really explicitly described Hermione's race in the books. This first popped up as an argument to this issue when Hermione's character was played by Black actress Noma Dumezweni in the stage show Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. At the time, when J.K. Rowling herself weighed in on this, she said that Hermione's race was always left ambiguous and accused those who were upset about this of racism. Always with the accusations of racism.
Can we please get something more original?
I think you guys will appreciate this. When I was looking for assets and headlines and things for this video to make this video, I came across an article written around the same time that all of this cursed child stuff was going on, and a writer was just full-blown calling J.K. Rowling out, saying, you never intended for Hermione to be black. Like, let's be real, so stop with this. And I think the reason I'm so tickled by this is because it was from a left-wing outlet by a presumably left-wing writer, and when they're even seeing through the retroactive changes and knowing how disingenuous they are and calling it out, I don't know, I find that a little satisfying.
Hermione's black, Dumbledore's gay, Hagrid is trans.
Editing Sydney here just to weigh in to say that there is actually one good thing that is trans.
Transforming yourself and breaking your bad habit, which is why today's video is sponsored by Fume. Despite what the internet says, you only get one set of lungs, which is why it's important you look after them. Do not fill them with water.
Sydney, I'm not going to simulate drowning.
Give them lots of nice air, and importantly, do not abuse them with bad habits and terrible toxins from vapes and the like.
Thankfully, there is a brand that can help you on this journey. Fume. Fume is this awesome flavored air device designed to stop any hand-to-mouth habit. And unlike a vape, your Fume has no heating components, no icky chemicals, and therefore isn't making you inhale grossness into your body. Instead, it uses these neat flavored cores, which you just pop into your Fume and go. They have a ton of flavors to choose from, and while I've always been a huge fan of the crisp mint, I'm now all about this orange vanilla. And because Fume is so good at what they do, they've been rapidly expanding their range to include this beautiful Solano Fume, this magnetic base to hold your device when it isn't in use, and recently these really cool toppers, which fit over the top of your mouthpiece and help elevate your experience.
So if you too want to break your bad habit and break up with these negative little toxins, then click the link in the description, scan the QR code on screen, or go to tryfume.com/Sydney. And of course, don't forget to use code Sydney to get your free Fume topper when you order a Journey Pack, a very cool accessory to really upgrade your experience with your Fume.
Anyway, with relation to Stanton's casting, Rowling tweeted that she was happy with how the primary trio looked for their roles. It's honestly been years since I've read Harry Potter, so, you know, on that front, don't attack me too hard if I misquote something, but I do own all the books, which has given me the ability to double check things with relation to descriptions and whatnot. But as I mentioned in a previous video about this, there are sentences throughout the 7-novel series that reference Hermione as white-faced, pale, and pallor, and getting very brown, you know, getting a suntan after going on a holiday with her parents. Now, I asked this last time and some of you gave me an answer, which was very helpful, thank you. But I overall deduced from the responses that no, it's not super common for, you know, brown and black people to be told that they look extra brown. So, I also think that it's worth noting that when J.K. Rowling described actual black characters in the series, like Dean Thomas, for example, she just said that he was black, and when she drew him, she made it clear that he is darker than everybody else. Like, the boy is clearly shaded. And the drawings of Hermione look like the main character of the movie Brave. So personally, I think the argument that Hermione is racially ambiguous is silly. I do not think that she was ever intended to be black, and when anyone makes the argument that she was, including J.K. Rowling herself, I think this is just retroactive editing of the story, which I hate. Anyway, as for our newly casted Hermione, here's where I fall on the issue. First and foremost, and probably most importantly, I am not going to sit here and pick apart an actual child. I just think that that's kind of vile, and some of the stuff I've been seeing online has been pretty icky, if I'm being real. And this little girl didn't sign up to have her appearance mocked and questioned and whatnot. She auditioned for a role that probably felt like the job of a lifetime, and she got it. The adults, on the other hand, are all fair game because they know better, including the people who work at HBO. because they super know better. Stanton, for me, is not who I ever really envisioned as Hermione, and honestly, I think that's okay. When we read books and think of what a character might look like, that varies from person to person. So while this little human is not who I expected or would have picked, I get why some people think she's perfect. But at this stage, and some of you might disagree with me here, I don't really think any of this matters, because the moment that the people at HBO decided that Snape was going to be played by a black actor, the moment that they decided to race swap him, they really set the tone for everything that was to come. This is why I'm of the belief that unless HBO cast a young girl who was a carbon copy of Emma Watson, or a young girl who had extremely pale skin and looked more like Rowling's original concept art, a large amount of people would not have been happy. As with plenty of entertainment, once a role has been cast and played by someone else, it's hard to see a character as anyone else. And it's why it's such a hard pill to swallow when characters are recast, replaced, or when a new iteration of a piece of media is pursued. For original fans of Harry Potter, our expectations were set 2 decades ago here, and Emma Watson is basically synonymous with this character. Which is sort of funny to think about, because within the Harry Potter fandom, there's a lot of people who don't think that Emma Watson looks remotely like Hermione, and that she was a poor casting choice from the beginning, but then there's a lot of other people who think that she's great for the role, and that's who they think Hermione is, and that's who we think of when we think of Hermione. Anyway, I have to imagine that the casting directors knew all of this, and they knew that anything that came after their Snape announcement was going to spark debate. I also do believe, and maybe I'm just sticking to this because I don't want to be wrong, I do believe that they would have race swapped Hermione, but actually changed their opinion somewhere down the road. Maybe it was because people reacted really poorly to their other race swap decision, who's to say? More than that, I have to believe that the people at HBO knew that a slightly tanned, non-Emma Watson carbon copy lookalike was going to upset people, because on a serious note, how could they not? For what it's worth, I do understand the arguments being made on the other side of this issue that revolve around, well, I guess number one, why do people care about this? This is basically a child series anyway. But more importantly, number two, this young girl is not dark-skinned. She's good enough for the role, so why is everybody concerned? This has to do with the fact that fans and audiences in general are hypersensitive to perceived changes to beloved characters. And that's because we've seen so many key white characters race swapped in other franchises. People are now poised to react negatively when an actor or actress diverges slightly, or a lot in a lot of cases, from widely held expectations of how they should look. In a way, people likely would have had less of an issue with a tan-skinned Hermione if Snape was left alone and cast appropriately. But because he wasn't, suddenly a casting that might have been slightly inappropriate but passable now becomes totally unacceptable to a lot of fans. The thing I find extra sad about this is that Arabella Stanton might very well be British through and through, maybe even with a very long line of English ancestry. Her tan skin could be just that, a tan. But in today's climate, where many casting decisions are rightly scrutinized for wokeness, what might have been otherwise an innocuous choice becomes a really big deal. In a way, it's sort of like being cheated on a whole bunch. These studios promise you something amazing. They take you out to dinner. They tell you that you're so special, that you're the only girl in the world to them, that you're just this amazing creature who came along and changed their life. Then you find out that they have 7 other girlfriends and you're number 5 in the rotation. This is not a personal story. This did not happen to me. The point is, the trust is gone. So when they tell you that they're making something wonderful and lovely and nostalgic, you don't believe them. Jokes aside, I think that's why these types of situations are so frustrating for viewers. Like I mentioned, J.K. Rowling has weighed in on these casting choices, saying that she is happy with them, but it really feels like she and HBO are trying to have it both ways, claiming fidelity to the original stories, while also making choices that invite controversy. And I genuinely don't understand what is guiding this. So here's the multi-million-dollar question. Who is this for? Millennials, like me, who grew up with the Harry Potter hype and the craze at the time, are the original core fan base, I would say. Don't argue with me about that. I will fight all of you. Anyway, we read the books when they first came out. We camped out for the movies and have film quotes that are still inbuilt into our speech.
Master has given Dobby a shock.
If only you guys knew how many times in polite conversation I have said the line, "Dobby is free," after someone handed me something. I think you also would judge me. There's definitely a few of them. I didn't know you could read.
I didn't know you could read.
Troll in the dungeon! Troll in the dungeon! Thought you ought to know. Oh my god, how many times, Sydney? Have you seen these movies? Too many times. That's how many times. But it feels like this reboot is not for us. The casting choices, Snape, Hermione, even John Lithgow as a non-British Dumbledore, suggest HBO is chasing a new younger audience who didn't live through the Pottermania. The problem is that generation doesn't seem to have the same attachment. They've got TikTok and Marvel and a million other franchises vying for their attention. Why would they care about a rebooted Harry Potter when the original films are still on streaming platforms? As an article by the outlet Vulture pointed out, the show's losing fans on both sides. Those who dislike Rowling's trans views, and those who hate the casting choices. Now we will have yet another unnecessary reboot that risks the original's legacy. Recasting so many iconic roles was always going to be a gamble, but HBO's making it harder by deviating from the original source material. Then there's this whole faithful adaptation promise. The showrunners for this series keep saying that they're going to be diving deeper into the books than the films ever could. Which is like, yeah, that's typically what happens. The films usually leave out a bunch of stuff because they kind of have to. But if you're changing core characters' appearances, how faithful can you be? I've seen people online suggesting that if the series wanted more diversity, then it should be elevating characters like Cho Chang or Dean Thomas instead of altering the established ones. Sure, why not give underrepresented characters more screen time instead of rewriting the ones that we know? I guess even here, right at the very outset, it kind of feels like HBO is trying to please everyone, new fans, old fans, modern sensibilities, and just completely risking pleasing no one. I do want to just make one additional point here because I do know some of you are probably going to bring this up, and that relates to the Harry Potter game Hogwarts Legacy and how well that did. A friend of mine, when I told him my thoughts for this video, he said, "I don't think this show is going to do poorly," and honestly, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe it's going to do really well and maybe it'll blow everything out of the water. I don't think so, but I guess we will find out when it's actually live. But with relation to the game, he said the game did well, even though Harry Potter has been around for forever. You know, it was a massively successful game, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, I think the reason why that's the case is because it was set in the Harry Potter universe, yes, but it wasn't recycling the same characters. It wasn't using the same storylines. It was making something new out of something that already existed, and I think that's why it hit. This upcoming show is recycling something that we already have, and I don't think people care that much, to be honest with you. I don't. I think that millennials do because we grew up with it, but beyond that, I don't see it pulling numbers like it did during the time when we had the Harry Potter craze. So, I don't know, I could be wrong, I'm prepared to be wrong, but that's why I think that Hogwarts Legacy did amazingly well and why this show probably won't. So all of that said, where does this leave us? In my opinion, although I don't think she's super right for the role and it's not who I would have picked for the role, I don't think that Arabella Stanton's casting is the entire massive disaster that people are claiming it is. But I do think that it is a symptom of a much bigger problem. HBO's Harry Potter series, not only now but also in the future, is going to be walking a tightrope, trying to stay true, apparently, to the original source material while also updating things for the new era. But with choices like Papa Asiadu for Snape and a Hermione who doesn't fully meet the fandom's vision of how she should appear, they are setting themselves up for failure by alienating the very fans they need to survive. I'm not saying for a minute that Stanton can't be great. In fact, you know, I actually really hope that this little girl is great and that this works out for her and she does a fantastic job and everybody really enjoys her performance. But I think if we're going to be directing blame towards anybody, it's of course course, the people who are working on this show and casting these roles and doing all of these things that are inviting so much controversy. And I think the showrunners are setting everybody up for failure because they are failing to realize just how attached a lot of fans are to the original films, whether that is correct or incorrect. Ultimately, this reboot, if we can call it that, at least in my opinion, feels like one giant cash grab. Are we surprised? Not really. Repackaging a story for a new generation who is not that invested, while simultaneously pushing away the millennials who are. And in the end, if HBO actually want this show to succeed, then I do think it's important, at least in part, to take into consideration what fans want and what they think. Not only when it comes to casting, but on what made Harry Potter so special and magical in the first place. Now on that note, and before I open the floor to all of you, this is just a reminder to check out Fume using the link in the description. They have been a long-time supporter of this channel. I really, really like this company and the people who are part of this. So if this is something that could work for you, it's absolutely worth checking out. Now I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? I know I've said this a bunch recently, but I really am very interested to hear what you guys have to say on this one because I think a lot of you are going to disagree with me, which is totally cool. As I say, we're not a cult. But do you think that Arabella Stanton is right for this role? Do you think that she's wrong for this role? Do you think that she is in fact a race swap because she's a little darker? Do you kind of fall on my side of this issue where she's probably English, she's probably just a little bit tan, maybe has some Mediterranean ancestry in there, and it's not actually really a race swap, but she's just kind of inappropriate for the role? What do you think of this whole issue? Do you think that the Snape situation set everything else up for failure, that that was a huge miscalculation? Do you think that this is not that big of a deal and everybody's just blowing everything out of proportion and really who cares? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you have made it this far in the video, congratulations. I always like having you along for the full ride. If you are new here and you are not subscribed already and you would like to see more of me and more of this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel, as well as leaving this video a like and a comment because I do read the majority of them, and in this case, I'm very interested in hearing your feedback. Once again, in the interim, I hope you all stay safe and well and make good choices, make very good choices, and I will see you wonderful, pretty people in the next video.